At least one person has been killed in renewed demonstrations over tax hikes in Kenya. The youth-led demonstrations have continued since last month, despite President William Ruto withdrawing the tax legislation that has raised the ire of protesters. He also fired most of his cabinet. We now speak to Wangechi Kahuria, Executive Director, Independent Medico Legal Unit and convener of the Police Reforms Working Group. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us, Wangechi. There seems to have been some movement. Obviously, what's led to the protests, where we are today, but there's still calls for President William Ruto to resign.
Yes, indeed. There has been a bit of traction since the Gen Z-led protests began 4 weeks ago in Nairobi, Kenya. They had several demands. But the youth are very clear in their minds that they want to see actions on all the points that they have raised. In as much as we have seen the withdrawal of the finance bill, there's still a lot that remains to be done. And what Kenyans are really fighting around is historical injustices. It's corruption at very high levels. It's mismanagement of funds and a lot of human rights abuses. So those are some of the things that the Kenyan youth are demanding change around.
So isn't this a shifting of the goalposts of sorts? I mean, the issue obviously was the tax bill, which then was withdrawn. Then President Ruto, in his wisdom, I suppose you might add, and I think through very multiple conversations on various platforms with the representatives of the Gen Z, then withdrew certain budgets, including budgets to the First Lady's office. He's fired his entire cabinet to bar 2 individuals.
It's really not a shift in goalposts, because you will notice that when the protests began, unfortunately, there has been lots of human rights abuses, including enforced disappearance. We are speaking of 50 people still missing. People have been abducted. We are talking about 53 people who have lost their lives. We are talking over 600 persons that have faced different forms of injuries. And so what may have begun as a very peaceful protest were infiltrated by, so to speak, state-led machinery and state-hired goods. That's what's coming out from the ground. And up to this morning, we still saw abductions going on. And therefore, the public has become much more angry. They're getting much more upset because instead of handling the situation peacefully and within the confines of the law, we still see these abductions, we still see killings of innocent people. And so these running battles have now become the order of the day. And what the call is for appreciation and safeguarding and the protection of the Constitution of Kenya, meaning that there should be space for peaceful picketing, assembly, and for the rule of law to prevail.
Wangechi, accountability, I think, is absolutely key to the people of Kenya. We've read that in the last few days, the chief of police has resigned. Does the buck stop with him, and as far as the individuals that have allegedly been abducted or remain missing? Or is this something that President William Ruto will have to shoulder himself?
You see, that's the rhetoric that we are demanding accountability upon, because in as much as the Inspector General of Police did resign last week, amidst what we know is pressure, there has been no command responsibility up to now. There's not a single police officer who's been arrested for prosecution on the basis of use of live ammunition, on the basis of use of excessive force, on the basis of abductions and forced disappearance. So in as much as the chief, the Inspector General of Police has resigned, there has been no action whatsoever in regards to accountability. And that is what the struggle continues to be about. That is what the protests are still about. And that's going to be, the Gen Zs have been very clear, just action on the demands that we have made. Let's get prosecutions going on. Let's get command responsibility. Whoever issued instructions, please do, take responsibility for these deaths. So that is the thing that the protests are going on about.
Wangechi, a couple of things. Firstly, from what we picked up from demonstrations, I think it was earlier today or yesterday, is that the numbers of those demonstrating seem to have dwindled. I think media suggests that you had a couple of hundred demonstrating, whereas prior there were larger numbers. I think is the first part of that question. Does that remain? And the second issue is a conversation I had with a journalist last week. He suggested that whilst it was the Gen Z that started these reactions that we're getting and these protests, it seems to have spread to other members of the Kenyan citizenry, if you will.
Yes, it's become a public outcry now because the struggle, as I did mention earlier, has been on for many years. These are historical injustices. This is a continued abuse of office and corruption cases that have never been, prosecuted. And so in as much as the numbers seem to have decreased in terms of the number of Gen Zs on the streets, it's now become a nationwide movement. We have a lot of different age groups just going onto the streets. But more so, besides going onto the streets, I think what is happening is a freedom of voice. We have people convening in the different X spaces, convening on different, spaces, forums, Facebook, online platforms where they present their issues, and there's a little bit more open talk. However, that is being curtailed by the threats of abduction and the threats of abuse and violence that's being meted out on the different people. So we are seeing a very complex scenario in Kenya, so to speak, mixed reactions from different groups of people. But, the protests, I can assure you, are still going on. They have just called for tomorrow. Is Thursday. They have the Gen Zs have issued a plan for tomorrow. So the protests are going on and in different parts of the country.
Wangechi Kahuria, Executive Director, Independent Medico Legal Unit, speaking to us from Nairobi and detailing for us what's happening on the ground despite President William Ruto firing almost his entire cabinet. There still are calls for him to resign.